What's up, guys, and welcome once again to the theScore eSports podcast. As per usual, I am your host, Colin McNeil. In the booth with me, we got Josh Burry.
Hello.
We got Daniel Rosen.
Hi.
And today, we've got an awesome guest. That is not hyperbole. Super excited. We've got Toby Dawson. You know him better as TobiWan. He is a Dota 2 broadcast personality extraordinaire. He is one of the premier voices of that esport. When I think of Dota, guys, and I'm not just kissing his ass here, when I think of Dota, I often do think of certain lines, including Hafu, you thief in the night, and other TobiWan #1 smash hits. So we're going to get into it with him. We're going to be talking about probably some of those calls, what's going on in the Dota scene right now, and much more. So I'm just going to go ahead and shut up, and let's get TobiWan on the show with us.
Hello, Toby.
Hi. Oh, amazing. I called in at this random time, and all of a sudden you guys are doing a podcast. How amazing is this?
It's also really convenient that when we rang you, you answered on the first ring. There was no sort of awkward silence.
You're wearing a headset. You're already prepared. We all have like the recording turned on. It's wild that it all happened like that.
It's incredible.
Yeah. Amazing. Just like the voice of Dota 2, which is only Pixel.
Ooh, nice. Very nice. Now, I did say you were one of the premier voices of Dota 2, so hopefully that still stands.
Yeah. Maybe. Hi, I still cast the game, sure, definitely.
You certainly do.
Yeah, I don't like any of those titles, really, because I don't want to fuel the ego that gets me in trouble, so, yeah.
Ooh, okay. We definitely don't want to get you in trouble.
It wouldn't be the first fall from grace we've seen in the Dota 2 commentator community.
I wonder who you're trying to trigger right now.
Wow. Well, we'll get to talking about casting pretty soon, I think. But Toby, one of the things that you were in the esports news for not too long ago had nothing to do with casting.
Well, it had something to do with casting. A little bit.
Well, a little bit. It had to do with content creation.
I'm preparing for this one. Yeah, go. Yeah. Which one was this?
Well, this one is BestMeta. It is, as far as I understand it, an esport cryptocurrency that the idea is it allows people to support their favorite content creators, and you are heading that up, if that's still correct.
Not still correct, actually. A week and a half ago, I actually left the project. I'm sick and publicly I said I'm just needing more time to work on other things and focus on other things. So yeah, I've internalized a little bit, and I'm redistributing my time and effort.
So essentially, BestMeta, it was taking too much Toby.
Yeah, we'll say that.
Okay.
Not enough Toby to go around, but the project is still going, but I'm not part of it.
But I think the downside here is you can no longer refer to yourself as crypto, like as an adjective. You can't be like, I'm Crypto Toby. Welcome.
I never referred to myself as Crypto Toby. I had enough of that. Like I traveled around to a whole bunch of the cryptocurrency conferences, and we met this guy called the Crypto Kid.
Wow.
Who was like this. He was really at least creative compared to everyone else that was there, who was just peddling their latest whatever. And yeah, so at least he was interesting. But it's a very interesting crowd to roll with, the conference crowd. But it's also the people who are stepping up, who are saying like, hey, I'm an expert in cryptocurrency, just to see how many people actually are experts in cryptocurrency.
I imagine the Crypto Kid staging a daring stagecoach heist.
The Crypto Kid appeared on
Bitcoin.
stage one time as an endorser, but it was funny because he came out and was just like, man, this guy's so awesome. You've definitely got to put crypto into this guy. This guy is amazing. And then there was another like 3 guys who rocked up after the Crypto Kid saying, yeah, this guy's really awesome. You should probably be in there. By the way, here's my entire 20-man team. I flew out to Miami just so you could all see them and understand that we are awesome.
This definitely reminds me of my favorite crypto-related piece of content, which is BitConnect. Was that guy there?
Wow. It's so generic.
Hey.
Ooh, maybe he's got some really interesting like niche information, but no, BitConnect was the ultimate meme.
Yes, absolutely. Even I'm so far from crypto, and I adore that video actually. So Toby, if some of your time has been freed up via leaving the best meta situation, is there anything special or any new projects on the horizon that you are throwing yourself at?
There's two things that I actually want to do. One is my YouTube content. So trying to get back into doing like opinion pieces as well as educational material. So I released a bunch of guides on like what I go through when I commentate, like how to cast a Dota team fight, for example, and the intricacies that come along with it, as well as some opinion pieces about the scene. And the other thing which I want to do is a little random, and most people when they look at me will be like, "You're doing what?" Um, but I just I get encouraged to pursue ideas and actually try and make ideas more than ideas. I'm actually concept them up and then see if I can actually actualize them. And I'm actually looking to try and create a game if I can get it off the ground. Yeah, so that's the other thing which is like simmering in the works once I find a team to help make a slice.
Ooh, I have to say both of those things are actually really interesting. I want to talk about the game, if whatever you can say about it at this point. But first, the first point you brought up, really, really interesting. A guide for casting, because we've had a lot of casters on this show. We find, believe it or not, broadcast talent is good at talking on a show. And I love to ask them about like, well, how the hell did you get into this, and how did you learn, and how do you know if you're doing an optimal job? Surely there's more to it than Reddit threads that are bashing you, kind of thing. What is the idea behind creating something like that?
Well, the idea at least I had behind creating the opinion pieces as well as the guides was to try and improve the knowledge of the community as well as make casters question themselves, because there's a lot of casters who get into a broadcast world just because it's so easy to do it these days. Like I came from a day when there was only audio casting, and when we started doing video casting, it took 3 rigs to actually pump out what is a basic XSplit stream today. And that made it a little bit more select in what you did, and it meant that the dedicated people were there. But now you just got to jump on, you have a microphone, you have a half-decent computer, and with games like Dota, when there's Dota TV, it's such easy access to get in that I saw a very large drop in quality. And because there was more competition, the quality dropped even harder, because the only way people would be able to gain attention enough that they would get Reddit thread exposure or any kind of like fan following was to say something controversial or to shit on somebody. Because the second they did that, they lowered somebody else to raise themselves up. And it's the cheap and easy band-aid way to become a commentator. And I wanted to try and change that by making the community aware when someone's doing something like this, and to give them the ability to appreciate the good points of a commentator. Like, what is done that you will never know about until somebody actually like cracks the glass and shatters the image. Like, oh, that's actually what they're doing the entire time. How did I not see that? So the idea is to try and just break that glass a little bit and help people understand what it is that a tier 1 caster actually does.
Okay, so is this sort of something you have in mind that will produce or bear fruit rather for future Dota 2 esports scene? Sort of, this is a project that's gonna help the next generation of casters and keep Dota 2 at that high level of broadcast talent?
I don't know if it'll actually be Dota 2, because a lot of the guides that I make, I get a lot of messages from people actually outside of the games. So I've had messages from... I actually submitted something recently, which was for people to submit me 10 minutes of them commentating, and I'll do a personal review of what they actually did. And the majority of the applications I got were not actually Dota. I had CS, I had Darwin Project, I actually had a League of Legends application, I had an Overwatch application. So it's really interesting to actually see what scene is always looking to improve. And I find that maybe Dota, at least this is a theory of mine, Dota feels really comfortable where it is with a lot of casters, or they feel very okay with where they are. They don't really feel the need to improve, especially when the tier 1 casters were always so stable. But maybe with the semi-retirement of LD as well as the retirement of Merlini, people are getting a little bit more of a feeling like they have a chance to break into the big events and maybe even attend the international.
Well, it's not the only esport that's lost a few tier 1 casters lately. Maybe you'll be getting my CSGO round commentary in the mail anytime soon. Josh, sorry I interrupted you a little bit there.
No problem. Yeah, I mean, I think this is so interesting. I saw it actually when I joined your Discord earlier. The act of commentating a game is something that I think a lot of people just take for granted as being, oh, you just talk about the game.
Yes.
But I've dabbled in it a little bit in like a kind of a recreational league, and it was so hard. So mad respect to you for even looking at other people's commentary, because I imagine that's pretty difficult too, right? To look at people who are trying to do this and maybe don't know what they're doing.
It's okay when they feel me to realize things that I do as instinct now, and then I see someone not doing it, and then it flags that it was actually important to learn from that. And because I've been doing this for 15-ish years now, so over time you stop thinking about things and you just do them naturally. I remember Poppy actually saying that when I talked to him early on, when he actually tried to co-cast me for a while, and he's just like, I don't like explaining basic things in Dota. He just doesn't ever think about doing it, mainly because he never thinks about it in the first place. So why would he think about it to then discuss it with somebody else? It's like breathing to him. It's just a natural reflex.
Is there something of a, because you mentioned, right, obviously you are best known for casting Dota. I know you kind of dipped your toe into CSGO a while ago.
Yeah,
and you're getting
that went well. That went really well. Yeah, this is when you learn the other lesson. Don't put two play-by-play casters together, especially when one of them is casting his first ever CSGO event.
Oh my god.
Yeah, because I cast that event with Satikist.
Right.
It was definitely a struggle, and I wish more people saw the cast I did with Henry G, which I did about 2 or 3 months after I did that PGL tournament, and I did that one over in London. It was just one weekend LAN event. But yeah, that was me casting CSGO the way I would have liked to cast CSGO.
Right.
But I missed the window, and there was already way too much like really talented talent in that scene.
Guys, I think I'm going to have to look that up because I haven't seen that. And Toby, I feel that you and Satikist are quite similar in certain ways, and you both have very similar talents that you lean on. It's sort of yin and yin. So I can absolutely imagine what that would be like. Oh, Joshua shook his head. Yin yang. Like
there was no yin and yang means we had balance. So yin and yang actually would make a lot more sense.
That's
because it means we would be out of balance.
That's exactly right. Whereas Henry G is the perfect counter. His demeanor.
He's the perfect yang.
But
Henry G is so smart and clicks so easy.
But what I was wondering is, looking at all these reels and having kind of dipped your toe into there, is there something of like a universal, like is there something kind of universal about casting that does transcend esports? Obviously, there's knowledge that have individual games, but what carries over?
It's kind of interesting because I feel in esports you get more carryover, but you need to understand why there's carryover. And I think the best way to understand that is to compare mainstream sports to esports. And I always put that down to Day9 as being one of the big instigators for pushing us away from what I class as generic American commentary. And I class it as that because when I watch the Major League Baseball, or I want to watch like the NFL or anything like that, like I feel whenever I tune in, I'm hearing the same caster every single time. Because it's the same kind of tone, it's the same kind of reactions, it's the same roller coaster ride as far as the entry goes. Something exciting happens, peak up, everything goes back down again. So it's very bland and impersonal and feels very fabricated. And I always put Sean as one of those first ones who talked to his viewers directly. When he was commentating. This was normally only for like Twitch streamers, because Twitch streamers were always like direct conversations, and we kind of had this hybrid creation, which was the esport caster, and it meant that you needed to connect in some ways. Obviously, when you cast like major events, you can't just connect directly with people by responding to what they say in the chat. That's very unprofessional, and that doesn't really push us forward as an esport. But the ability to actually connect to what's inside their mind, the ability to connect to their emotions, that's the critical thing. Like someone wants to feel like everyone's talking over there in Twitch chat or whatever chat you're using, Facebook chat. Oh, no, good time to get phlegm in my throat. And you have like these guys like just talking in the chat, but I want to watch the stream and think that I'm personally being spoken to by whoever is commentating, and that's something which I think has been transferred very nicely across all esports, because it's what's asked of the esports casters, especially the ones who cast in English, that you're talking to everyone, you're not biased, you're commentating for a global audience. It's not regional rights being sold. So I know I'm not only just talking to England, I'm talking to worldwide audience. So these are the type of things that I think just overall like a pass between every single game. But then again, I say every single game is very different, because every game runs a different rhythm, which means the caster needs to run a different race.
Interesting stuff to consider for sure. I like that you did touch on that there is a certain amount of universality, because I think if you're a talent caster in one game, I don't see any reason why you couldn't become one in another with just the right.
For play-by-plays, yeah. For analysts, not so much. Analysts are a lot harder to transfer.
I guess that makes sense, because there's a certain amount of just game knowledge required to analyze anything. So
yeah, well, they'll tell that to Red Eye.
Oh.
Yes. Well, Red Eye is a panel host. That's different.
Yeah,
like,
this is true.
A panel host only has to get the best he possibly can out of the panelists and know enough that he's able to ask them the right questions at the right time. So that is definitely a difficult thing. But to actually be one of those analysts, or to be the analyst caster, requires you to not only have the knowledge, because knowledge will only get you so far. You need to have the respect level. You need to actually say, like, I've been there, I do that, I speak from a position where not everyone will instantly challenge me, because whenever you speak on a broadcast, you are always being challenged, be it by Twitch chat, be it by Reddit, be it by direct communication, be it by just somebody's mind who's listening to you, where it's like, man, that guy's wrong. Like, I did the same thing back when I used to watch the NRL when I was a kid in Australia. And I was like, okay, I want to talk about like why isn't this guy talking about this, because this is really important. Or he said something like that was a forward pass, and I'm like, there's no way that was a forward pass. And you'll do this like, that guy's offside, wasn't called offside, that guy's obviously offside, why doesn't the commentator see this? And it creates a level of frustration and a level of disrespect for whoever is speaking it to the viewer. So whenever you have an analyst come in and say this is the way this is, and someone's like, no, it's not, then there needs to be something that is able to overcome that, and analysts need the respect.
I want to circle back to a topic that we almost skipped over, which was the game.
Yeah.
I didn't forget.
Oh,
I got it in my
okay.
mind, man. I'm just waiting. I'm like poised to strike.
Okay, we'll strike away.
Well, my strike's not particularly deadly, but it was just going to be, please tell us as much as you can about this game. I want to know.
As in my game?
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, okay. So I kind of wanted to build up a game, because I see a lot of developers doing some very interesting choices, and I kind of got to a point where I just started to dislike the games that I was playing. Like they had a certain amount of play value, but then it just dropped off drastically, and it always required like huge patches, huge changes, or things like this to change that up. And I also feel like a lot of the games were not really designed to work with what I believe is the upcoming and probably going to be the biggest market out there, and that's the influencer market, which in my view will probably take over most of the budget resources from esports once people understand that. So I kind of wanted to design a game that would give the communities which are out there a great hub to play from, and to give them something which means something for a long period of time. So I'm being very cryptic with what I'm saying, because I don't want to say too much. But to put it simply, it's going to be a large amount of players in a sandbox style. But you will value what you have. Yeah. That's the best way I can try and say it.
I think I'm getting there. I think I'm drifting into the direction that you're pushing me. Yeah.
The question I kind of want to ask here is that not necessarily. Let's talk more about kind of the impetus here. What do you think are what do you think are the weaknesses of the games you mentioned that you are kind of frustrated with their inability to, let's say, pivot towards that market? Like what is it like, what aren't they doing, I guess?
So a big one I think is like let's look at PUBG for example. PUBG versus Fortnite, which is probably going to be the biggest debate that everyone has in the point of their minds. And you got PUBG, which is a very realistic style game. That's what they aim for. It's a very crisp kind of engine to fight with in first person as well as third person. Everything is nicely detailed, like it's very large scale, it's 4K, it's all that kind of jazz. And that game is, like, for me, like, is sick. And then you look at a game like Fortnite that comes out, and it's a cartoon style game. It's very quick. It was definitely an afterthought with the Battle Royale side of things, because Fortnite original was PvE more than anything else. And I personally, when I played the PvE, it was terrible. But the game engine allows for quick adaptions. It allows them to chase the memes. It allows them to really create things quickly and dirty without having to have it be refined. So you got two very different audiences which are out there. And PUBG obviously then tries to push for esports, even though the game really, like, it's the meme, but it's accurate. It's not ready in its current form to actually say it's competitive, because there's too much RNG in there. And then you have Fortnite, which I hope to God it doesn't try and get competitive, because if it does that, then I think we're going to find ourselves going down the same lines, because you're playing the developer handbook. I've created this game. I now have to create esports. And this happens a lot. And the main reasons why I bring up Fortnite as well as PUBG is because one game I think can actually be really well designed for esports. The other should not. I'm not saying it cannot. I'm saying it should not. And these are the weird decisions that you see being made. So you got PUBG, who haven't created a competitive mode. They have like a tournament client, but it's still not a competitive mode as such. It's like, we're just going to copy paste what is a public game and then say competitive scene, go nuts on this. And then you got Fortnite, who's able to make a whole bunch of different modes, but they're mainly just being consumed by their users right now. So one game I see being handled correctly, as long as they keep doing that, and the other game kind of feels lost because they want to do a whole lot of stuff, but they haven't refined it enough. And when you do that level of engine, it forces you to actually be refined in what you do, or else you have these real scrutinizing problems that you just can't get past, which is where the esports ready joke did come in, because the game isn't ready to do that type of stuff. So competitive still could be fantastic from both sides, but it's just understanding who's doing what. And I find developers get lost a lot when they come to this point. As far as the games go themselves, I understand where the current game market is, which is now moving away from these, I hate to use this word, but everyone understands what it is, MOBA games. Because it's like MOBA's, like, it's too difficult to understand, so everyone was looking for simplistic. PUBG came out, very simple, jump in, survive, have the adrenaline rush of the blue circle. What H1Z1 never really gave you, because everyone's like, it's buggy, it's whatever. And then Fortnite comes along and then does the same type of thing, but it amps up the adrenaline because you've got really quick building, you've got very fast repositioning because of the building elements, and of course you've got the Battle Royale shooter aspect. So then you take it up another level, and then it's like, how far can you go before everyone's like, where's the next shift? Where do we want to go from here? And that's where I'm trying to sync my game timing in, which will be in about 2 years, when everyone's just like, man, I just want to slow things down a little bit, and actually have that pace, but not have it only about that pace. Because Battle Royale, it cannot survive for long. It's a very bright flame, and it'll run out of gas eventually.
Why do you think it has to run out?
Quite simply because your entire life can't be an adrenaline rush. Only a certain amount of people who really want to have that type of experience. I feel like everything is like a roller coaster. Like, you ever play Roller Coaster Tycoon, and you had that nausea rating. that appeared when you tried to create your own roller coaster. It's the same. It's the same type of thing. Like, I don't always want to be going at high speed straight down. They're being kicked into a vertical climb. To do such a thing, like it doesn't feel natural, and you as a player will feel burnt out eventually, unless all you're doing is sitting down for like half an hour each day, which for a lot of these games people are not. And the same type of thing will happen for the viewer base, where streamers want to slow down and actually talk to their viewers. They want to actually have breaks, so then they go off and they play these other random games like Golf It or whatever, because they're like, okay, I just need to just have a little bit of chill out fun, slow things down, and then just go from there. And that, I think, is where the game starts to transition.
All right.
That's where that's like why people like play Hearthstone and games like this, because you can have all the time in the world to speak to your chat, to interact with your community, which is what it's all about, to be an influencer these days.
That makes sense. I'm wondering, because you touched on this a little bit. This is a topic a conversation we've had in the office a lot over the last couple of days. I think a lot of the popularity of these Battle Royale games, when compared to something more hardcore like the MOBAs, is that they do respect your time a little bit more. You can play for 5 minutes or 5 hours and you're kind of there. Do you think that might have a little bit to do with sort of, we don't have Steam Spy anymore, but we have seen that over time, even stuff like Dota, the player base is shrinking?
Yeah, it's also that weird thing, right? When you look at the player shrinking base, it's like, you want to have one of the greatest videos you could probably make is looking at when games come out and its effect on other games. So when Dota 2, you go through its timeline and you'll see this huge drop off and be like, okay, well, was it actually 7.00 release? Actually, no, it was probably the fact that Zelda came out at exactly the same time, and people just want to start playing that on the NDS, or whatever the hell it's on now, the Switch. So you have like these other games that come out, and then they draw people's attention away. PUBG comes out, 3.2 million people are playing it, which means other people will also be like, well, maybe I'll go and play this game now because everyone else is playing it. And this is the transition you have as a gamer. No game lasts forever. Like, most of the big titles in one singular version will last for like around 7 to 9 years for the big titles, and most of the time they've done a half reinvent halfway through it, which is like Dota Reborn was. Like, it was their way of saying, well, we're going on to Source 2, sure, but we're trying to rebirth the game a little bit so it feels different. And you can have the same type of thing when you look at StarCraft. So you had like your original, you had Brood War, you had StarCraft 2, and then they try and release different versions outside of this. So it's all about developers holding on to the big esports titles, especially when you become one of the top 3. You want to hold on to this, and everyone knows eventually they have to move through. So there's going to be a very interesting shift in the next couple of years when you look at games like League of Legends, because Riot's got a plan. There's no way Riot throw away everything they've built. So then they know they need to transition their game into something else, because it is reaching that point where the technology, as well as just the game mode, is going to become really, really sad. Some people are saying Artifact is meant to be the next version for Dota, and maybe it will be a place for the community to shift to, but it won't be the next version of Dota. But this is like where you go next. CSGO runs strong, but how long is this going to last? Everything lasts for a very short span of time, and this is always affected by software, by technology, by a gamer getting bored. So transitions will come.
Absolutely. I mean, there are some exceptions, right? We see stuff like the success of Super Smash Bros. Melee, which has been around for 13 years, but even that, at some point has to go.
And I mean, that community is pretty tight and small.
It's pretty small.
We're talking about,
but
the tier 1 esports.
Where I want to jump from there, though, is that, and this is kind of coming around, right? You're trying to sync around, let's say, 2 years from now with your game, looking down the line. You mentioned that we're seeing the rise of these very kind of easier to get into, more accessible games that are slightly more casual. Do you think that, in 2-3 years, we're going to see the more popular games be those games that aren't necessarily designed specifically for the, and I also don't like this word, hardcore crowd?
The most popular games will be judged by how many new people they can attract. Because you hit 3.2 million people in PUBG. I'll keep using this number just because it's the easiest way to explain it. So before then, you had like 1.3, 1.4 on Steam was the peak, which was Dota 2. CSGO didn't even hit that. And then someone can come through and say 3.2 million people are playing my game on the Steam platform. Now, yeah, this could be numbers coming in from China, but what people are going to deem as successful is the amount of viewership and the amount of users you reach. That's why I think people like Ninja are going to become pioneers. And when you say like Doc can say, oh, I'm the face of Twitch, he isn't anymore. When you can have somebody jump on and like he's streaming right now as we're doing this to 168,000 people, and 186,000 people. Yesterday he was streaming out to 120,000 people, probably bumped up by 60,000 just because season 4 of Fortnite just started up. But he does his event, which he did with eSports Arena, and he bounces up to 700, 800,000 people. Tournaments, eSport tournaments would kill for this kind of viewership. And they're like, well, why can't I get this? Like, and why can't we just make Dota better, or games like Dota better, in order to gain the viewership? And the reason is very simple. It's what is easy to understand for any consumer. Mainstream, normal, continuous gamer, hardcore gamer. Like these are like the a very limited amount of groups. There's a lot of groups, but it's the ability to actually attract these people in, get new audiences in, because that's going to be the definition of success. How far can you actually push games? It's not about taking the current market of players, which is there. It's about growing the current market of players with something that is attractive to them to get them to play what is a game, but what they will never see as a game when they play it. This is why mobile gaming connections are so important for all the new games coming up. Like that's why Fortnite, PUBG, they got themselves out into that market as well, because they understand that you need to make your game easily accessible. And I'm not just saying like, oh, it should be on a console, because even consoles for some people are really hard to access. But everybody has a phone. Everyone has a smartphone. So this is the audience you want. You want grandmothers playing against their sons or daughters or whatever, like just because you can reach so many different markets, and that's going to be the elements of new games that make it very attractive while having a high level of respect. So if you can get a AAA title respect while still reaching all of these communities, like you're going to blow these numbers out of the water, and then you can take the strong numbers that the influencers create and that are very easily transferable from game to game, and then use this to boost your own product. So yeah, for me, the marketing of computer games is going to drastically change as people work out which audience they're actually trying to reach.
Go on, Josh.
Yeah, I was just going to say that was the first time I've ever heard someone talk about the Battle Royale genre in the way that I view it, which is that I can't play like 10 of them back to back.
Yeah.
You mean 10 individual games of PUBG, Fortnite, whatever.
Yeah, I can't. I can't.
No, I'm with you. I can play 3-4 games, but that's kind of my max.
I thought that was interesting because it's funny. I always think of Dota and even League, for me, they're very intensive, mentally intensive.
100%.
Like 45 minutes, you have to commit to this game, and you have to be thinking and trying and clicking the whole time, unless you're, of course, dead, and you have a long death timer, right? And then the Battle Royale games, the attractive thing to me, and I don't particularly love them, you guys know that, is that I can just I don't feel like whatever, I'm just gonna die in this game, no consequences, don't have a 45 commitment, I won't drop in rank, I won't get a 30-minute cooldown. So
this is why the answer is to play Street Fighter, Colin. So the answer is to play Street Fighter, Dragon Ball, where you can play some slow games sometimes play some fast games. Really depends on what the opponent's playing like.
I can also play them on my couch, which it's really important to me at this point in my life, to not sit in a computer chair for 12 hours a day.
I'm just glad to find out that I'm not the only person who's like playing Battle Royale for like 2 rounds and then being like, damn, I gotta play some strategy. I gotta just get my head out of this.
I need a cool down.
Yeah, no, seriously, because like I have friends who were playing PUBG like all day.
Yeah.
Like I had a friend who was unemployed playing PUBG all day. I could never do that. I always need to like chill out, and it's just refreshing to hear somebody talk about it like that for once.
So what I was saying before our little conversation break there is just I didn't want to interrupt Dan's questioning, because I thought you guys were having a good conversation, but something did stick out to me there that Toby said, which was Toby, you said flat out that games don't live forever. They all have shelf lives and lifespans. You used StarCraft as an example, and I think it may not seem it on the surface, but it's quite an interesting comment to me, because I think, especially in the esports landscape, we're often thinking about when we will get to the point where it becomes like sports. Usually the Olympics are involved in this conversation, right? When will we get to the point where, okay, well, 100 years ago, people started playing Counter-Strike and they're still doing it, like baseball with relatively few major patches, let's call them, right? We got a designated hitter and we got a pitcher who hits kind of thing, and maybe the analogous esport there. But it's interesting to me that you flat out said, at the very least, we're not at that point yet. Will we ever get to that point?
It's kind of hard to say without everything being centralized. So, we've been talking about influencers and their ability to transfer their viewership from game to game. And in fact, normally when they play a new game, like, hey, new game just came out, it's an early release, no one's seen this before, viewership spikes because everyone wants to know the opinion of that person who's playing the game. So I think that's kind of where we can at least hold some of the momentum that is built up by the brands inside of the gaming world, by having it transferable to the next thing. Of course, deciding what is the next thing is still going to be a shit show because every single developer is biting for that exposure. Every developer who is starting up a game will be like, hey, Ninja, can you play my game? Like, I want to have Ninja, Doc, and Shroud all inside the same game, playing as a team against what I created, because my exposure is unbelievable if I do something like this. So this, I think, is going to be the strength of the future. If you asked me like 3-4 years ago, I probably didn't see this fully coming. I saw some of this coming, but I thought mainly it would actually come off the back of studios and the ability of groups like ESL, for example, to create what is a continuous platform to run games which can incorporate new ones, satisfy the established scenes, and also understand when it's time to push out the older scenes. And then you would have this transition that will come through. So it'd be like creating the NBA of gaming, because you can't just create it for one game. And it's the easiest way to look at it too, where every game is its own sport. So how do you get all the sports to work together? Sports allegiances are very, very set, but then you got a lot of crossover teams that appear in multiple areas too. So that's where we can continue things, but it's all on the power of the brands to maintain across multiple titles and to maintain their own fan base and to have people excited when a new team is picked up in a new game for that one brand. Then I think we have the ability to transition forward. But it's not like football. It's not going to just sit there and last forever, and we make slow tweaks to the game, and it's all about then the league which is created. So hey, it's the FIFA World Cup. This thing is epic for all reasons, but like, where does it go from there? But at the same time, like, you need to have games being unique, like individually, like respected, which means you can't just create things like the World Cyber Games and say, hey, this is going to be fantastic, or say, hey, let's be part of the Olympics, and say this is going to be our answer as well, right? Because we just need a big global organization with money that's able to run things. Like the amount of times we've watched WESG just throw crap tons of money into the scene, and there's no level of respect. It doesn't push a brand forward. All it does is line the pockets of players with a little bit more money, so then these guys go and retire and actually take their brands from our scenes. So there's no easy answer to it, and I don't think there will be one unless one game or one organization can rule them all. But as we know with Lord of the Rings, that doesn't always work. There's always going to be some kind of hobbit to mess things up.
Yeah, and don't forget, some greedy Boromir who wants it all for himself.
He was trying to save
It
Gondor.
was a mistake. He died for his sins.
Yeah, I'm a Boromir fan, man. I'm not trying to lay some shade on my man
It's
Sean
just
Bean.
poor Sean Penn. He can't just not die in everything he's involved in.
He's one of my absolute favorites, man. Dead or not, I know he's not dead in real life. Just to clarify. Toby, I want to put you on the spot a bit. Running through this subject of esports lifespans, the tier 1 esports, by which I mean Counter-Strike, Dota 2, and League of Legends, they're getting on in years. How long before Dota 2 goes the way of StarCraft?
So I always say it this way: games which become part of the top 3 and who have dedicated communities like StarCraft, like Dota, never die. That's actually a complete fallacy as far as like the death of the scene, the death of the game. There's always gonna be enough players. It'll just never be as big as it was. And that's the critical point to where the shift comes. When do you take something from the community? Or when is something visibly taken that makes you look weak and nothing is put in its place? That's where like TI prize pool moves backwards.
Right.
User base moves backwards. The battle passes aren't there. Instead, we have this Dota Plus that just runs throughout the year. So is this now the new thing that comes our way? So I lose something. Something needs to be given back to excite me to continue to play the game, or to continue to keep the community there. And that's where I think a game starts to deteriorate. That's when a game doesn't change, it doesn't adapt, it doesn't strengthen through the hard times, and it doesn't transition then as well if it's being neglected too much. So yeah, for me, like I think it takes a while for games like Dota to deteriorate. I think the critical things will be how Valve handles the minor major system, aka how does the show throughout the year? How do you maintain that momentum and not just say it has to be TI? This was the reason the major system was invented in the first place, because it was only ever just TI and nothing else counted. So Valve needs to handle this properly. The movement back in the prize pool is an eventuality, just because if you're losing a player base, like if you move from 1.3 million players to 800,000 players, there's only so many people that will be spending money on the international. And yeah, because everything is done behind closed doors, maybe Valve is tweaking their numbers where they push more money in to the prize pool just so they don't have to deal with the fact that they would potentially move backwards. But they'll only do that for so long before Valve will be like, okay, now we're going to start to lose money, or we're not making as much as we want to. We'll just take the PR hit. So yeah, it's a hard question, and I don't think any game ever wants to think of itself as dying, but you always have to think of the community as transitioning, and where are they transitioning to? So no one will ever want to say, or no one ever wants to go out there and say this game is dead.
Nothing ever dies; it just finds an afterlife.
Who is it that said heroes never die?
Yeah. On the on the just to jump off.
That's the new great esport, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's absolutely provably true. Yeah.
I note that you did not include them in your top 3 esports there, Colin.
I said tier 1 esports. You know, we're not even through the first season of Overwatch League. You know, so I couldn't possibly include them in that.
You should also keep in mind as well the values that go along with what makes a tier 1 esport. Like, it's not just the ability to be in the scene. It's the ability to sustain through the scene. That you can't just be, oh, I'm in the top 3 because I have all the money now. Like that's not the way this works. That's not the way how you gain the respect, right? So build up the respect, and then we can go from there. Maybe Overwatch can reach it. They've definitely done a lot of things to improve their game and improve the viewing experience for Overwatch. So they're getting there. They're in the top 5 for me, but yeah, they still haven't cracked 3.
Agreed.
So you brought it up a little bit in when we were talking about, you know, how much life is left, but I'm wondering kind of, so, you know, now that we're kind of, I guess, 2/3 ish, I'm very bad at math, into the this year's, you know, Dota Pro Circuit, you know, what do you think of the current system?
I hate it. Like, to put it very, very simply, like, a lot of players have complained about this as well, the fact that only the top 4 teams from an event are able to claim points, meaning that we're reaching this point with only 3 majors to go, with one of them currently going on and 1 minor left, where there's only like 6 teams who are potentially in reach of knocking out the top 8. It's kind of crappy when you think about it that way. So many teams that could have deserved the points when they reached the top 6, but because they didn't reach the quarterfinals, they don't make it. They don't get the points. So, yeah, I feel like a lot of the efforts of a lot of the teams throughout the year has kind of gone unsung. I feel that a lot of the efforts of the tournaments has been very half-assed, and I don't put that totally on the tournaments. The primary issue I feel with the current system is the only people who are being rewarded are the players. And not saying that they shouldn't be rewarded, but when you think about it, to run a major, it has a $1 million prize pool. The tournament organizer must raise $500,000 for this. And the only money that Valve gives is the money to make it a major, which is the $500,000 prize pool. Now, tournaments before then, the biggest ones you were having was 250 to 300,000, unless China was bankrolling it. So then you ask, where is the extra money coming from? Did Dota just become more attractive to sponsors all of a sudden? Nope. In fact, it was almost the opposite. And it was opposite because tournament organizers were buying the respect that came with a major, which CS organizations fight so hard to get that they try to keep proving themselves throughout the year to say, hey, I'm worth a major now. So then it goes back, so where is the money coming from? And the money gets pulled out of everywhere else. It gets pulled out of production. It gets pulled out of all the extra costs and the extra sweet things that go to make an event look cool. Be it stage, do I raise the ticket prices? Like, where is the extra cash coming in? Is it coming from the compendiums that make tournaments like Captain's Draft or the Summit, which really helped launch BTS into a real prominent position in the Dota 2 scene? Like, these type of tournaments, they don't have the funding anymore, so they don't exist anymore. The compendium money, which was raised from the sale of sets, is now is exclusively with Valve. The only way an item gets released is inside of a treasure chest, which Valve puts inside of their battle passes previously, and they've announced no other system to change that. So that money's not getting into the tournament organizers. It's not even getting to the hands of the artists properly because they're having to split it with everyone in the treasure chest. So where is this money coming from? It's coming from the story. It's coming from the prestige of the tournament, and it's just going into the pockets of the players, so then everyone can just buy up the respect of being a minor or a major, and then this lessens the ability to say, I'm a major winner, or I'm a minor winner. And then there's no progression apart from points to the end goal. So there's no like, hey, here's our halfway TI. Hit the super major. Why is it not in the middle? Why are the majors beforehand not the qualifications for the super major? Why is there the ability to not transition properly? And why do we have like a 6 to 7 month window where teams are incapable of changing, which then disqualify them from having like any points go towards TI because they couldn't change in the window which Valve offered them? And then Valve had to offer it then as well because it was the only way their system would function. They don't balance out their calendar throughout the year, and the money's not going where it needs to go in order to keep this scene alive and to have what we were discussing just before, the brands maintain throughout this game and ready for the next, unless Valve is just sitting there saying there won't be a Dota 3, and that would be a very scary concept, the fact that Valve wouldn't transition the game.
I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Dan and Josh here, but I think it was Sir Action Slacks we were talking to some months ago who said that he thought that this new major minor system might be something of an experiment to see which TOs could sort of hack it, you know, like which ones they're going to throw it at everybody, give everyone a chance and go, oh, that major sucked. I guess they're not going to get when we reverse the system or when we go back to something where there's less and there's more value placed on each individual one. We know who's going to do a good job. I believe that was Slacks, guys.
It was, yeah.
Okay, good. I was just wanting to make sure. I don't know, Toby, do you think that could be the case? That next year we'll just see something completely different?
I would like to think that. I have been told by some friends in tournament organizers' positions that is not the case. So yeah, you never know with Valve. Maybe they change their mind. Like what I heard is they're already taking applications for 3 majors before the end of the year. So when you hear that, it's like, okay, that means they're not trying to balance out the system. But this is what they're doing now. We're only 5 months into year. There's still more time. They can still change up everything if they listen to feedback or if they ask for feedback. So nothing is ever really set in stone when it comes to Valve. But I definitely know what Slacks is talking about because Valve love to experiment with things. Like if they wanted to create just the CSGO scene all over again, they would have learned nothing. So they try and mess around with things. Seeing which tournament organizers could hack it, you're 7 years into your game. If you don't know by now, then you'll never know because you can't analyze what people do in other games as well. Come on, like that doesn't float for me. It's not hard to make the right decisions when it comes to Like, okay, yeah, you gotta trust somebody, that's fine. But you have you have redundancy plans. You have ways to get out of this. You have ways to ensure that your calendar year isn't just written off as an experiment after you just shut down. Like you took away the majors, and then you gave a lesser version of the majors back. So you can't just say, well, I'm passing it off as an experiment to make sure the next year is going to be good, because that's just disrespectful to that 12 months. It's disrespectful to the community to say you're not just going to give it your all and you're just like you're running an alpha scene now after we've been fully running. You can't step back like that.
Yeah, makes sense.
That's a fair comment, honestly.
Yeah. This is going to be a pretty hard veer, I guess, backwards. I don't know how to say it today.
Oh, are we doing the time machine portion of the show?
Time machine portion of the show.
Okay.
We're working on a project right now about older TIs and things that happen at old. Well, this is actually not a TI. Sorry, this is leading up to TI. So older Dota tournaments, and specifically, we're kind of working on something about kind of old Alliance and when they won G1 League ahead of TI3, and I guess I'm trying to what we're really trying to nail down, among other things, is kind of, can you give a sense of how dominant the Chinese teams were back then at all?
It's kind of. Are we staying in the Dota 2 world or the Warcraft world?
I think
because it depends how far you want to go back.
Mm-hmm.
Because in Warcraft 3 Dota, yeah, China was the be-all end-all. Like there was no one that was able to stand up to them. But the Chinese were also very secretive. They never even released their replays for 6 months after a game was played, just out of fear that someone would be able to see their strategies and analyze them in high detail. So they were very, very secretive. Southeast Asia was insanely strong. Singapore and Malaysia had rivalries back then. Vietnam was a huge hub as well. Europe was strong, but it was nowhere near the level that was Southeast Asia as well as China. Dota 2 came along and everything else changed. Because Na'Vi was the powerhouse. It was all CIS. Europe was trying to keep up. Then Alliance came along, so we shifted over towards Alliance. Of course, in the middle of that, you had Invictus Gaming. And there's a reason why every TI leapfrogs regions. So, yeah, CIS won the first one, then China, then Scandinavia, then China, and then America, then China, and then Europe, and maybe TI8, China. Like, it's no scene ever really has held the reins of Dota 2 to a point where you could say they were never able to be contested. It wasn't like Warcraft 3 Dota.
So then, taking it from a different angle, obviously, things came towards, looking ahead, like, oh, well, it looks like, Scandinavia with Alliance is strong after that win. Did that win over the Chinese teams in China change the way analysts were thinking about, the competitive field?
Analysts always change the way they're looking at the competition scene, because every scene plays its own meta, and then when it all comes together at a LAN event, a new compiled meta is kind of born, because every team, they're kind of set in their ways for what they want to do, and it forces either others to play their style or vice versa. So it's a never changing kind of thing. I don't think you can just say it was because of TI. Like TI is its own meta inside of its own tournament. Everything else is kind of just like a lead up to that. When it comes to like any tournament, actually, everything else that comes before it is just it's padding. And then if a team is really dedicated to making sure they win this tournament, they come in with a lot of plans. They're going to be the ones setting the tempo of that tournament. So it doesn't matter what region they're from. Everyone will be able to step up.
Okay. And then I guess the last thing on this note before I let Colin take us back to the present, going back to that.
I have such incredible powers.
Yeah, so it's power over time travel, power over when people call in. It's unbelievable. Talking about again that Alliance winning G1 League, you've talked about it a little bit, and obviously things change all the time. Was that win important in the grand scheme of things? Did that mean something to people other than just Alliance winning?
It means something when a foreign team comes onto Chinese soil and wins there, or at least it meant a lot back then, and it kind of kicked the Chinese into gear. I remember Sean actually coming up on stage as well, trying to rally most of China and Southeast Asia because he was like, we're all playing like crap right now. Like we're all accepting streaming gigs and we're not practicing enough. We're playing RPGs on the side. Like we should be doing so much better than this because these teams who are here are so much better than us. And that's what you kind of get from LAN events when one team wins so heavily in a region where you're like, I should they shouldn't have lost, or it's almost disrespectful like to themselves that they actually lost to them. This is what changes the scene. This is what changes the tempo. It's the foot up the ass.
All right, awesome. Thank you for entertaining our time travel nonsense.
Yeah, that was quite a curveball.
Another problem.
Now, Dan said that I would bring it back to the present. I'm actually going to channel my time powers even more intensely, and maybe bring it a little bit to the future as we wind down on this
Call
podcast.
one of the bronze dragonflight.
That's right, man. Wow. Holy shit.
Colin Dormu.
Okay. All right. So we've got TI in Vancouver coming up. I know the office here, our offices are located in Toronto, Canada. Technically the other side of the continent, but hey, it's the same country. So,
yes.
You know, whatever. We're excited. We're very excited. How about you? Does it matter to you that it's not in Seattle? Are you slightly excited to see a different city for once? Or are you just like, well, I'll show up and I'll be in a hotel and one's the same as the other?
I was actually really excited, and I was like 4 years ago when it was first mentioned that Key Arena was going to go under some kind of construction work, and I'm like, sick. We don't have to go back there. And the primary reason is because I believe the international should be international. I know we were in Seattle because we were in Valve's backyard, and they were very happy with that. Like after what happened at Gamescom. Where they were like, there just wasn't enough of us here to run it. And then you rock up to TI2, and I'm being served food by one of the coders of Dota 2 at the frickin' lunch table. I'm like, what the hell is this? Like, the entire thing was manned by Valve employees. And I'm like, okay, I get it. I understand why we're going back there. But I feel that something that is the international should give a lot more respect to the worldwide audience, and I think it also should give respect to different time zones when it's played, because the American time zone is ass for Europe to listen. Like they're not gonna be awake. Like the first game begins at like 2 a.m. most people's time, or 1 a.m. their time. It's like, okay, well, you're gonna screw up your body clocks for this one. Hey, let's have a great all the European bars. Everyone's gonna rock up to them at 2 a.m. in the morning, to then be there for 12 hours in the day. It's too much bullshit for them. But if you do it like in Southeast Asia, then Southeast Asia, you start during the day. You start in prime time Europe, and then you go through into American prime time and like. An SDA time, like there's better primetime overlaps that you actually get when you have tournaments in both Europe as well as Southeast Asia, and especially for a game like Dota, which I don't think draws a lot of viewers from the American region, or nowhere near the level that they draw from Southeast Asia, China, CIS, or Europe in general. So I always felt a little bit sad that it was the American primetime that was actually receiving the international, and it was always the American crowd receiving the international. And like, yeah, it's great that it's going to be in America or in Canada. Like a lot of the people who I know went to TI came down from Canada anyway. Like it wasn't that far for them to go. As long as they can get past the border, it was going to be fine. But there's like, if you held it in Singapore, like if you you would have everyone from Southeast Asia coming in. You want to fill a stadium? That's the way to do it. You run it in China, you can fill a stadium. You want to run it in the Philippines, you're going to have an insane crowd that would rock up to that. The Filipinos are the greatest crowd ever. And even in Europe, like it's so close for everyone to travel over. There's huge populations there to go for. And I feel like America, like it feels a little bit too spread out compared to all the other options that are there. So yeah, I was kind of happy the day like it was even possible that we wouldn't go back to Seattle. And the fact that we're going to Canada just kind of feels like we're just like bouncing up into the yard of Seattle. So we're not going that far. Yeah. So it's great for Canada that they get something like this. I know there's a lot of great players that come out of Canada. I know there's a lot of viewership that comes out of Canada. But I still feel like the rest of the world's kind of being shafted a little bit.
It's certainly a baby step. That has to be said. It's a good point about the international not being very international at all, actually. Toby, before we do let you go on the podcast, I just wanted to give the floor to you and see if you had anything that you wanted to bring up that we never prompted you about, any sort of even shout outs to the fans or final thoughts of any kind.
Okay. Shout out to everyone who doesn't believe a caster has to be a one-game caster. Shout out to everyone who follows me on social media, even though Facebook's stealing all their data. Shout out to everyone who just enjoys what I do, even though I've been doing it for a long time and maybe not changing as much as I probably should be changing, but I stay true to my emotions, which keeps me where I am. So I hope everyone still enjoys what I do.
Oh, well said. That was very good for an on the spot shout out spree. Toby, thank you so much for making time for us. It really was a pleasure speaking with you today.
Not a problem at all.
All right, thanks so much, man. Have a great day.
All right, guys. So for once, I'm going to make this wrap up real clean.
Take
And
us out
we're
of the
not
spot.
going to ramble for 10 minutes about nothing in particular. And I want to thank everyone who listened or watched this podcast on YouTube for tuning in. We do it every week. Thank you so much to our guest, TobiWan. Like I said, it was a pleasure speaking with him. For Josh Burry, for Daniel Rosen, I'm Colin McNeil for theScore eSports saying until next time, GG.